So hi everybody. I'm David. That's Brian. That's Andreas. That's Chris. You know everybody else. We don't.
I think a lot of people might know it.
Yeah, and I know you know, they probably know this, but Brian and I, this is our first UDS. We're happy to be here. We are here for a couple of reasons. One is generally to talk to anybody who wants to talk to us about Mozilla in general, Mozilla messaging in particular, Thunderbird in particular. But we're happy to answer questions about anything that we know anything about. And we're more than happy to talk to people about their pet peeves with Thunderbird, just not in this session, except if they actually align with what we're really trying to do here, which is we're trying to understand how Thunderbird and Ubuntu can work sort of better together to make a better experience for new users of Ubuntu. So in particular, we know that everybody's got a different set of preferences. We know about all of them. Our job, just like for Ubuntu, is to make the hard calls about what's the default behavior. That's where all the pain is, the arguments. So it's not. Hopefully, we won't have too much of an argument. We also wanted to let you guys know about some of the things that we've been working on that either you are already in Thunderbird and you may not know about them, or we're sort of thinking about adding to Thunderbird. What else did I start with? All right, so I'm apologizing for running Mac. I'm not really apologizing for running Mac. I'm apologizing for not being able to run Unity on a VM, which is a known problem. So I'll do some quick demos on the Mac, and then Andreas will show something that I don't have working on his Ubuntu. Ubuntu.
Running good on the show.
Yes. So let's see, what's the best way to start? So I guess first maybe sort of a framing kind of point. Yes, we've heard about Gmail. Yes, we know it's an interesting email experience. We actually think it's pretty, there's lots of really good things about Gmail. We still think that there's significant long-term strategic value in people having email systems that they can control, where the data is stored on devices that they can control, that are highly customizable and configurable, where you can build third-party add-ons, where there is actually a non-centralized alternative to things like Gmail. And so that's what's driving us to do email. I suspect we have fairly strong alignment on some of those things. We're also not here to bash evolution. I think evolution is great. If you want to bash evolution, you could organize a part later. If there's any evolution people here, I'd love to talk to them.
Evolution people as in devs?
Yeah, or even fans. But devs in particular would be really interesting. We don't have that kind of connection that we should have. So we're not out to get anybody. If we are, it's Outlook. It's not really relevant. And so we actually think it's really good that there's multiple options for mail clients. That's one of our primary sort of beliefs, that choice is good. And the other thing is that we struggle really all the time to figure out the right balance between power features and making things simple for non-technical users. Just like you guys, we have millions of users who don't necessarily understand what a mail client is, where the ISP is, and all those things. So we struggle with that a fair bit. One of the fascinating bits of data that we collected in the last year is, so we get a lot of people downloading Thunderbird every day, and very few of them actually keep using Thunderbird. Well, we know Thunderbird's just an issue, but it's not that bad. What's going on? So we did a survey and found that 2/3 of the people who downloaded Thunderbird expected Thunderbird to come with an email address. And we were asking them, what's your email address? And it's because Thunderbird was designed in a world where you have email at work, or at your ISP, and then you've got an email account. That's changed. People have a completely different relationship to email now. Email is now a complete stack, starts with the email address, all the way down to the disks. and the user experience is just somewhere in that process. So we're doing some work to address that, talk about that. But maybe let's start with a couple of things. One is Thunderbird 3 is now the only supported version of, well, 3.1, but offering Thunderbird 3.3 is the only supported version of Thunderbird. It has significant re-architecture that makes it a much, much better development platform. And some of the things we'll show today are really sort of built on top of that. In particular, we do have a database that's really cool. And one of the things that we realized as well is that setting up a new client is really hard. You have to know about SMTP servers, and IMAP server, cloud servers, you have to understand SSL, blah, 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 blah. A lot of people get lost. And so we decided that we're trying to fix that. So we built this thing called ISPDB, which is not really about ISPs, but it's about email service providers. And it's a process, a database, a web service, and a feature whereby you can crowdsource information about how to configure email on your ISP. We review that to make sure that it's correct, because that's a massive security flaw if you don't. And then we publish that as a web service for Thunderbird and other email clients to say, oh, this person wants to have an account with this ISP, what are the configuration data, and then it works. And when it works, it's awesome. Like you type your email address and it just works. And unlike, say, Mail app or the iPhone, worry about the top 3 or 4 ISPs, we're happy to have hundreds or thousands of ISPs in the database. And the data is all open source and you can make your own server.
So, just one thing, the projects where we're sharing that data with is right now Evolution and Kano.
And Postbox.
Oh.
And what, sorry?
Postbox, which is actually a commercial fork of Thunderbird.
That's all right.
Yep.
Windows and Mac.
That's right, they don't have So ISPDB is I think, a really good thing that we've done, and it's just beginning still. I mean, we've had a few thousand domains, I think. There's many more to go. But it hopefully will allow us to surface some interesting data about what the email will look like. So the second thing, do you have the account provisioner working?
Yes, I do.
Let's talk about that a bit.
So we're working on this piece right now that's an add-on in Thunderbird, and it's called account provisioning. And that's basically solving what the problem David was talking about, where 2/3 of all of our users are expecting to get an email address, right? So we've created a web service that does kind of a proxy for people, like services that provide email addresses, so ISPs and things like that. And right now we have a company called 2Cows, who have been using the internet for a long time. You remember 2Cows from like download and stuff like that. They actually provide email addresses, lots of different domains for like last names and things like that. So we have an add-on that you enter in your first name and last name, and then it searches their site for email addresses that are available that match that, right? So I could get like brian@clark.com or something like that, right? Or whatever they have available. They have tons of different, like they have a good matching algorithm, and they charge, like I think it's maybe $20 a year, something like that, to have an email address. There's also the ability for people to provide free email accounts, things like that. And so even if, one day Ubuntu wanted to provide Ubuntu email addresses, you could actually hook into the account provisioner such that people put in their first and last name, and like the first result is, Joe at ubuntu.com, right? And then they can like just get that. It downloads the configuration for the account, and then Thunderbird is serviced with that email address, and people are set up to go. And this is because most people on their first use of email, like they're just expecting to grab an email address, right? When you go to gmail.com, you don't have an account, they sign you up for one, and all of a sudden you have email. So I think we can kind of demo how it works a little bit.
I'm working on it.
All right,
In a minute. But essentially it's, the first screen that comes up. Launch Thunderbird. Instead of the, what's your email address, it first says, let's get you started with an email address. If you already have one, click here and we'll take you to the regular process. But otherwise we can set you up with an email account. And any provider can hook into this. Right? It's like we're building an API that other people can push their kind of service provider into, so that people can offer, like Yahoo can offer an email address maybe, or if Gmail, gets an API into this, then they could offer a free email account and things like that. So that'll help people get started on like creating an email account. And then from there, if you already have an email account, like Dave was saying, the ISPDB is the second part where we recognize the email domain. We go and fetch all the email account settings. You don't have to enter port numbers, know about SSL, TLS, all those things.
Right.
And Thunderbird gets set up from there. And this is all because, right, like, I think kind of like, maybe like this session, we're really worried about the first install, like the default client experience. That's where we lose most of the people when people download Thunderbird,
Right.
is that default setup, like what happens when you first run it. And there's tons of different ways that people use email and different kind of preferences and whether you like to be sorted ascending or descending by date, things like that. And those are definitely hard questions, but like,
I like threads, I don't.
yeah, threading, not like, and those like, you know, we have a pretty good add-on infrastructure and ecosystem to actually really help with that. And we're trying to kind of build that out such that people can almost define that experience, right? Like an add-on that we've been trying to figure out how to work is like a keyboard mapping, right? So if you're used to Outlook and all the Outlook keyboard shortcuts, there's no reason for you to like lose all that learning information and try and learn Thunderbird keyboard shortcuts. You should actually just install an add-on that's Outlook keyboard shortcuts, right? And kind of run with that.
Yeah, I've used like a sort of working one. It's like a Gmail shortcuts.
Email shortcuts, yeah, exactly. So you can kind of just build on the knowledge you have, not learn a new system, and kind of get up and running.
Can you guys just introduce yourself for the streaming?
Oh, right.
Oh, someone already did that.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, okay. This is David also as well. Maybe we'll do a couple of the demos that are running.
Yeah, I couldn't get it to work properly.
So we have videos of this session. It's not going to be a live stream, so I'm going to move one of the cameras to. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Here we go.
So one of the things that we've been exploring is different ways of displaying mail. And what I'm showing here is an add-on called Conversations, I think, Thunder Conversations, done by Jonathan Kotsenko, who was an intern with us, but he actually started this before he was an intern with us. And what's kind of interesting about it is I'll show you two sort of alternative views of email that are not the traditional one. So this is conversations in the three-pane view, so no changes to the folder pane, no changes to the thread pane, but the message pane becomes a conversation pane. These are the messages that were already read, and so they're collapsed, but I can expand them.
Wait. Sorry, camera fail. I'm trying to.
That's all right. So you can access the avatars for everybody. We've got collapsed text by default. We've got nicer fonts than the default. And this is just you can do all the usual storing.
This is on trunk or 3.2?
Now, see, this is the problem, is that this add-on actually requires some patches that can't land anywhere right now. So, well, no, this is actually on 90's trunk, but it has some bugs that are fixed if you use the patches that haven't landed yet. So we actually are trying to get a tri-server build up, but it failed or something. But anyway, mostly exciting because it shows how flexible. We've actually got all this information in a database. We can do a bunch of cool new UIs. This is not ready for prime time, but it's kind of cool. And then the Unity announcement this week was really interesting to me because we had similar issues with, well, I don't know actually what drove Unity, but in Thunderbird land, if you use a netbook screen in the standard view, which is, I never remember which one is standard view. Step one, no. Yeah, whatever. Pretty quickly, if you have anything in your thread pane, your message is really tiny. And so we realized that netbooks really needed a separate UI. We couldn't fit everything in the standard thing that was designed for large screens. And so building on the database that we now have, we built this new thing. Unfortunately, my version is pretty open, pretty broken, but hopefully you'll get some of the idea. Realized that in Thunderbird 3 we have tabs. So you can open, say, trash folder, sit there completely broken. Forget that. You can have tabs, but then you also have navigation by folders. And so there are two different metaphors for navigation that seem kind of weird. And so here we actually use, we're inspired by an add-on from Firefox, which puts tabs on the side. So these things are actually tabs, but they feel kind of like folder things. And in fact, if you open a folder on this really slow installation for some reason, it'll show up down there. And so here we have tabs for folders, tabs for conversations, and you can explore all kinds of new UI, all built on the same database. So you can still have Thunderbird getting your messages, you still have that whole same infrastructure, you have a completely different UI. So this is not close to being ready, but it was an interesting experiment. Anything else we should do about that?
Yeah, I mean, right, the key design here is just to like, remove all the Chrome. Right? In a netbook, you have limited space. Your height is actually really limited. You have some width, right? So this builds on that fact by putting the tabs on the side. You're kind of taking advantage of the horizontal space and limiting the vertical space. When you tabs on top, you're taking an extra, let's say 24 to 30 pixels of height away from people reading messages. And also, this sidebar here works kind of like a folder pane in the way that it builds up the folders that you're using. Right, in a regular Thunderbird folder pane, it shows you all folders all the time, and you click into some of them.
Built-in smart folders.
So yeah, exactly. Building in smart folders because it just remembers. It uses session restore. So if he shut down this thing right now and brought it back up, all his same tabs would be there, just the same way Firefox works. Right? And the same with conversations. Right, they're indented underneath the folder, so you kind of have this mapping between folder conversation that I open it from, and you can kind of keep going back and forth with those things. And so yeah, we have in here a bunch of different experiments. There's like compose in a tab, contacts, attachments, and a couple other things. But this is the kind of the general direction, right? Is to say like less Chrome, more about the message, using this kind of conversation view that we built. There we go. And so this is the attachments browser in a tab. Each of these things you can click on and it opens the attachment. And it's got like inline search on every tab. And so this is the kind of thing that is not ready for release, but is the direction we're heading for, right? We wanted to have something that would be for netbooks specifically, because the Thunderbird interface really doesn't work all that well in terms of screen space and things that are needed. And it allows us to kind of like do more interesting things.
Yeah. And everyone else is failing at it horribly, so it's an opportunity to...
Yeah, and it uses the Thunderbird backend, right? And we have, one of the best IMAP client interfaces out there, right? Like, and everything is pretty fast. And with this, it's called Cloda, is the database that Thunderbird uses to back all the storage for search and things like that. It has awesome relationship mapping, between people can have different email addresses and lots of messages between them, and so it works really well. And when it's fast and the latest version, it looks pretty awesome.
Is this
Sorry for being late,
Yep.
but I just want to catch up. This is a new netbook-oriented thing. Is it also touch-friendly by design, or is it? Are you thinking about that?
Yeah, when we built this, the Moz touch interfaces actually weren't available, so we didn't even think about that. But there's nothing about this
That's
incompatible. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so this is really sort of the, I'm sure you guys know this, making experiments on trunk is really hard. We learned that the hard way. And so we're doing pretty much all of our new development is in add-ons. And that allows people to opt into the experiment. So we actually get feedback from people who are curious as opposed to nightly users who are often just nightly users because they signed up 5 years ago.
Or 10.
Or 10. Although I don't think we got a nightly updates. And then we can take some of those learnings and then apply them back as features. So for example, this attachments thing, we actually first started in here, but then you can actually get an add-on for Thunderbird regular that also does the same thing and does faceting, so you can say, show me all the add-ons from here, and that shows me the add-ons. So anyway, this is not really about, I just wanted to sort of show some of the stuff, but what we really want here is actually have a conversation about Thunderbird and Ubuntu, and what are the things that we can do both within our small team, but also advocating with other people at Mozilla and also figure out who here is able to help. So we've already heard about the global menu. We know that's a big issue on dual runner apps. We already know about the messaging menu. Although I think it would be good to actually schedule smaller meetings with people who can give us technical details on those things.
No, we can definitely hear that. We kind of had a...
They're all here. So
Yep.
There's a session today talking about the message menu architecture.
All right.
So you should come on to that. Contacts.
Yeah, we know that contacts is a sore point. Frankly, contacts in Thunderbird is a sore point for everybody. And luckily,
So it's not a sore point because at the moment all of the different messaging options sort of have their own contact stories.
yeah,
But it will become a sore point as we try to create more of a system service around contacts, which is a clear direction for sort of everybody.
Yep.
And I'm guessing it's a clear direction that you will face on other platforms as well. So,
yeah. And so I think it actually would be relatively. This is a scary thing to say, but creating an address book service implementation for Thunderbird that talked to the local couch would actually be, I think, relatively simple. We actually know a fair bit about couch because we use it in other projects, and we already have portable contacts to Thunderbird address book merging. So we've actually done some experimental work in terms of integrating contacts in a variety of ways. You may have seen the Firefox contacts add-on. We actually have a version of that for Thunderbird that also talks to the Thunderbird address book. So we actually know how to move contacts around fairly well. There may be some issues around asynchronous calls to make sure that the autocomplete is always anyway. So there's some work there, but I think it's relatively straightforward.
I suspect any issues that you throw up are issues that
Other
service
people
needs to be able to respond to.
Yeah, I'm more worried about our code base.
Assumptions.
Yeah, because it was really built for. But it's I think we could treat couch kind of like LDAP, and actually probably would work out okay.
So I would throw out the challenge that Ubuntu would be better off with Thunderbird as the default mail client, and actually ask the desktop and platform team to counter that. And going various shades of red.
we had a brief conversation in the corridor earlier, and I think we probably wouldn't be up to it this cycle with all the Unity work. Changing the default mail client is quite a significant job because there's a lot on the platform that currently depends on evolution.
No, everybody hates us now, so.
The difficulty with that is business users. It's great that it
Let's
supports
talk about that. So,
It's
what
great
is
that
the
it
use
supports
case?
IMAP, but it has no exchange support. The address book, as
Is
you say,
the evolution exchange support of any quality whatsoever? Is it still
Yes.
scraping the?
no, it's
No,
not.
it's mapping now.
Yeah.
It's open.
They've got mapping and they also have web data.
So there's a couple of things we could do there, right? One is we could certainly talk about what it would take to add exchange support to Thunderbird. There's political issues around not supporting open standards. There's technical issues. There's actually a guy, Ken James, who's recently published the first alpha of his exchange add-on for Thunderbird. He is trying to do this as a business, so it's not open source. So there's some issues there. But the other thing that Brian thought about this morning, which is too bad because, as he said, if he thought about it last night, we would have the feature implemented today, is when we're doing the account configuration, we can say, oh, this is not an IMAP server, this is an exchange server, there's no evolution set. We don't do that. You don't do that?
No. Because then two people on the phone talking to each other about their email can't help each other.
Yeah.
But isn't that true today?
It's true that a person can add Thunderbird or add Evolution, but anybody who can add a different mail client is usually smart enough to recognize that they made a choice that's different, which is why the person on the other side of the phone may not be seeing what they're
Very
seeing.
interesting.
So they're very strong.
Still,
Yeah. But again, testing, pushing things. So Exchange is a commercial product. If there is a commercial option to talk to Exchange, I prefer there to be an open source one, but it's hard for someone who's paying for Exchange to get upset about.
Yeah, but that's
Having to
if
pay
there's
to
a
talk to
commercial solution. I'm not aware of one.
I mean,
Well, so
IMAP is an open standard.
Yeah,
It's
they're-
the open standard. Anyone who's using open source mail servers is talking IMAP. So,
Many organizations, well, A, they don't want to enable IMAP, and B, they want all they pay a lot of money for Exchange, so they want mailbox delegation, they
Yeah.
want to be able to, the calendar integration, they want the global address.
A lot of
the
it-
question is the quality of the integration. Is the evolution's quality very high?
It is. I mean, it's been in development for a number of years, and they support all these advanced features. So it's definitely.
I don't know, any Exchange admins we turn on.
Okay, so people who are talking to Exchange could make a conscious choice to use evolution. I mean, Thunderbird does Gmail well, right? Does Hotmail well, I assume?
Hotmail doesn't do,
Yes.
well, but actually we're, some things I can't talk about, but we're trying to make it so that there's more more free IMAP service providers.
Right. So,
Because we think IMAP is better than
so I mean, from the point of view of the Ubuntu desktop, which is an open and free product, we looked at open and free products.
If all we care about email is email, Thunderbird is an excellent choice. It's a very good email client. It's just if you care about contacts and calendar,
That brings us to calendars.
So the context
the
for-
contact story for evolution, we're going to face real issues with, because nobody wants contact in the service.
Are you going to talk to the, I mean, I'm just kind of curious, are you going to talk to contacts, is Evolution going to talk to the local contacts database and Exchange?
sorry.
If you're running the local couch, that's how you do contacts, right?
Yeah,
Or-
you can already sync your Ubuntu One contact with Evolution.
But where does Exchange fit into that process? That is what I'm trying to figure out. If you have
Exchange is just another service, so if you configure an Exchange account, now you have access to your local contacts, right? That's a totally separate service. It's effectively like aggregating it, so when you autocomplete, you're autocompleting either from your Exchange contacts or from your own contacts. If you choose to physically copy them in, you could, but I don't see why. Yeah, so like I said, from an email perspective, it's fine. I think contacts and calendar is great. I mean, like Sunbird, right? Is
Like,
a calendar.
can you guys kind of give us a state, Sunbird, Lightning?
Songbird?
Sunbird.
Sunbird.
So Sunbird
Yeah.
was actually stopped over a year ago.
That's what I thought.
There's a state.
Okay, good.
Lightning, so just for the people who don't know the words, because words are tricky. Sunbird was a standalone calendar client.
Correct.
Standalone to the point that it didn't have email integration at all, so it couldn't do invitations and things like that.
Right.
Lightning is the add-on to Thunderbird that integrates with the email system, so it provides calendaring and tab. And so Lightning is still going on, but since most of the developers were working for Sun, actually even before the acquisition by Oracle, most of them had been moved on to other Sun projects, and now I have no idea what they're doing. So right now there's not a huge amount of development going on Lightning.
Any community developer involved?
There's a few. It's really hard. I think one of the challenges for Lightning has been to figure out exactly what kind of a calendar system they want to be. Because Sun for a long time had it as a, just looked like Outlook.
Yeah.
And that is not actually a great contributor for it. Just throwing out.
Yeah, that's been the biggest criticism of Evolution.
Yeah.
Right. It works. It's the same thing that makes it appropriate for business users makes it not a great contributor in the store.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so we do a lot of work with OEMs to produce consumer devices, and I completely agree that Evolution is not at all appropriate for that use case. But it was our best option, I guess.
It's the option that we care about.
So,
Consumer.
yeah, well, yeah, it's a good point. Not all
It is.
consumers really care about having an email client.
Not all of them do, but the ones that do want a good one.
Yeah, they do. And so Thunderbird actually fits very well there, especially because they have things like special Gmail thing, the ISP is great.
It's great that people who have Windows desktops can have the same mail client across Ubuntu and Windows. I mean, we shouldn't underestimate the value of that.
Yeah. So the contact story, it's quite nice to have those configured contacts and calendar, if you happen to have that, available to the rest of the system. Is there any way to do that through Thunderbird?
Well, so I think, if we could figure out how to make Thunderbird contacts talk to the local couch, I think it's I don't see why it would be impossible to get talk-to exchange. I think one of the other things that so one of the biggest users of Thunderbird is the French administration, and they're interesting because they actually have money to deploy, hundreds of thousands of seats. And so one of the things that they're doing is they're investing in a web gateway to Exchange called Dabmail, I guess it is.
Actually, I put that to the copy doc earlier.
So Dabmail is, I think, an interesting deployment for enterprise users, I think, because it's actually just a service you run that does the mapping between Exchange and some standards. My guess is it's not, I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know what they do calendar, I don't know what they do for contacts. They probably do hard contact switches. Questionable for us.
So for calendar events, for the rest of the system, there is an add-on called Evolution Mirror that talks to the Evolution database, so that your the appointments you make in a calendar actually shows up in the clock.
Right. And then you're configuring things twice. Yeah. It seems heavyweight, doesn't it?
Would it be valuable if we did some user testing on both Evolution and Thunderbird?
Well, that's one thing I noted. I'm
That
actually
would be
quite
helpful.
impressed.
That would be helpful for Steve.
Sorry.
That would be helpful for you.
Yes.
Okay, we can do that.
I've been quite impressed with their research on the user experience. It seems like they're putting a lot of emphasis on that.
We're here.
Well, we can see if that shows up.
Yeah.
I'm sure it does. But what I'm saying is it's one thing to say you're doing a lot of work on it, it's another thing to say, well, we put it in front of 10 users and
We'd be really
It
interested
actually
in
does.
that.
actually, so we can do that.
I'm just saying it gives me confidence that they care about it.
And we care about it. As I'm sure you guys know, like, there's things we know Thunderbird does wrong. But figuring out how to change that so that people don't take the change in default as a personal affront is a hard thing. Even though, like, you detect, we don't change defaults on people who have existing profiles and all kinds of things like that. People who set up Thunderbird, people who seem to change computers a lot, so they set up Thunderbird a lot. So figuring out how to change the defaults without upsetting existing users is a tricky task. You know that.
I'm wondering, can you show the same profile between Windows and Linux? Because that would help with the Ubuntu Lite also, possibly.
Yeah, very interesting.
Or we could just proxy to Ubuntu 1.
So I
Yeah.
don't know any reason why not. My guess is if you can't, it's just because of bugs. I think for a long time people have done that with Mozilla profiles. It's if those are going over slow links, it's probably not a good idea because that's where, for example, the mail database is. Those are all fixable things, right? Like, if that's actually a really important thing, I'm sure we can make it happen.
Would there be a best practice for how one would sync and replicate content like that across multiple devices?
Well, so our experiments so
One
far.
option is try and get it into a generic transport layer. The other is to say this is special data and we should have a special mechanism for.
Well, so the mail database, for example, should not really be shared. Well, I guess it depends why you're trying to share, right? If you're sharing across devices, you clearly need to have the index on both devices.
But they can be generated.
But they can be generated by each device
Right,
independently.
with credentials and preferences.
That's
and
right. So right now
tags.
we're using sync as our weave. No, the sync. The weave protocol, which is in Firefox Sync, and we have an add-on for Thunderbird that syncs contacts, account preferences, passwords.
And account settings. So you can jump to a new Thunderbird, any new device, you log in and everything's done.
It doesn't have your mail, but
that's
it
an
knows
experience we
it.
would want as well with No2.1.
Assuming, IMAP or something like that, you're instantly set up, it downloads. And it would work for mobile devices too, because Fennec has sync. Anybody could do an email client that also uses that same library that then syncs your account settings and things like that as well.
Someone on Axe team is already working on a prototype Thunderbird Ubuntu 1 sync and running into these issues.
Oh, that's so.
I'll make sure we link.
Yeah. Shane is we should contact the person who is working on that.
How easy is it to use?
Can you?
So Mark mentioned before, having a view for maybe a smaller device or whatever. You know, you've got all your stuff configured, you got all your data, but maybe this is going to work as the screen gets really small.
Yeah, yeah. So, I don't know what's wrong with my mouth. I guess it's not happy being around so many notifications. So the add-on, the netbook add-on there is a really good model to look at.
Yeah.
What's interesting about it is all HTML and JavaScript. Everything is just done by querying this, these JavaScript services, getting JSON objects back, and doing what. So if you can do web dev, you can make a new Thunderbird UI, which we think is pretty cool actually. Yep.
Well, no, I mean the netbook one is all HTML. It's essentially like so. This is
Right.
a whole frame.
So it's using Gecko.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
So, do we get accessibility working with this URL?
As long, as much as a web page. So,
Yeah.
the Firefox, all the ARIA stuff.
What is the general accessibility story?
We think it's pretty good, but we haven't. I think there's one feature that is known not to be accessible, and it's a zoom on the timeline search, because that's really hard to do. But as far as we know, everything is
Generally,
accessible.
you consider it an accessible product. Standard hooks, whatever it is, ATK.
Yeah, I mean, we get all, everything that Firefox does, we get for free, and we have accessibility people who look at Thunderbird a lot. Apparently, Thunderbird is very popular in the client community. So, when we break it, we find out about it really fast, which is nice.
How about translations?
Same issues with Firefox.
42?
Similar to the way Firefox.
Yeah, same one.
Oh, yeah, same way.
And is that hard of that?
Then
It's
there's
making
some challenges with
our
it.
life harder, but like we do it for Firefox, we could do it for another.
And the left
Well, it's just
So-
a different database,
Well,
it's
Different format.
Is there
different format, so the language packs have to be.
Nice.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, it's not the same process, it's not going the same way all the time, it's not part of the standard work.
If there's things that we can do, by the way, they're not Thunderbird specific, but like, so for example, I've picked up in the last couple of days that the way we do translations is problematic. We should talk rather than just like, maybe there's simple things we can do, integrate into our build system, something that generates files that work for you, right? At least, I'm not on the internationalization team, but I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be possible.
We have a whole team that can help you talk about these issues. It's definitely a priority.
Yeah, if we're serious about it, we should probably have that conversation.
I'll talk to David Clement to talk to you guys. What other blockers do you have, because you're running it?
Peter, you collecting actions?
Say,
You collecting actions?
I'm taking my own notes, but I haven't.
He's got the copies.
Who does?
You've got the copy.
Yeah.
Those actions, research,
Which?
the research one,
Yes.
user testing, translations, Ubuntu one.
Assign that to me, please.
Just out of curiosity, do you guys support the current?
Yeah, well, we support VCart 2, but we're now in VCart 4.
That was a whole lot.
No, sorry. We are not in VCart 4. The spec is at VCart 4. No, we haven't done much with VCart.
Just one of those little nitpicks. People send out their contacts by vCard and you can't import it.
No, as long as they're not super fancy, that usually works. The problem is, I was talking to Tenzek about the VCard spec and it's a disaster.
It's the IMC for you.
Yeah.
Useless.
So anyway, there may be bugs, but people do send me VCards and then they show up in my contacts.
Mika, what's the state of the daily builds as far as T-Bird? Same as Firefox, right?
They're not really running it, are they?
Yeah.
We have 3.1 running, we don't have 3.2 and I'm trying to get, I'll get those this week.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Really simple.
Yeah, so we can get daily builds out to our users relatively easy. So we're working on tightening the feedback.
Mm.
Yeah. We when you break something, hopefully you'll hear quickly from us as well.
Yeah, so I mean, feel free to see us on bugs that aren't getting traction, because we know it's that happens in bugs that way. And the reality is I haven't come up with a way of making that process perfect.
And you use the Mozilla Bugzilla, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because we have a plugin installed there where we can do two-way comment syncing and status tracking and stuff. Have you guys used that feature?
I've seen it go by.
Okay.
It's because that makes a lot of people unhappy a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, we should be discussing those issues.
Massive
Hundreds of bugs.
It got switched on, and there was a lot of
Comments.
Launchpad spammed their Bugzilla on a lot of old bugs.
Oh, I see.
It just wasn't like it wasn't
They were-
introduced.
they
It
were-
was just turned on. And
Yeah. So, yeah.
But going forward, it essentially means that it's a seamless conversation between folks who reported a bug on Ubuntu and that bug then getting either connected to an existing Mozilla bug or filed as a new Mozilla bug, and it becomes just one conversation with people using their respective tools. Sorry about the flood.
We'll see how it goes.
That sounds like we should have a process for turning that on and being bug trackers.
Yeah.
Is it on or GNOME?
I'm not sure. I can't see.
No.
It's on the free desktop, but zero. No.
It's on free desktop.
I just remembered, we actually did use Thunderbird in one project 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago. And for that project, we needed remote access to Thunderbird's data and found out that there wasn't. And I think we had to end up writing a dbus service or something. And I think that can be useful, like if you wanted to, for instance, create a widget, which is a very commonly requested feature of a running inbox. You don't want to rewrite an email file, you want to use the email you break up. So, do you guys have any story on remote access to that information? Other desktop applications being able to access that?
No, but that is, so we have an add-on called Thunderbird at Rest, which does a server. We can, yeah, I don't know, let's figure out what the right thing to do. I suspect we're going to need to do dbus integration at some point for Unity integration anyway.
Yeah.
So there's work to do there. And I think figure out what the right thing to do. The same, you're going to have the same issues with Firefox with notifications when those start showing up.
Yeah.
You said that netbook UI is available as an extension.
Yep.
Where can you get that from?
Someone take an item to just blog about that, because that's pretty
Yeah.
cool anyway. It can help you out get some of those.
Because we can package that and ship that in one of our PPAs for users to download.
Yeah, I'm not sure we want the bug reports yet. Like it's
Okay.
really researchy.
Okay, so never mind.
Well,
You probably do a better job than all of us. So.
Yeah, blogging that, yeah.
we'd like to run it.
You have my contact info. You can ping me when any of this stuff is ready for eyes. I can bring eyes.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. That's what I'm worried about. Those eyes have fingers smashed.
So for most of the experimental add-ons, they live on mozillalabs.com/messaging.
Yeah, that's
So,
where we talk about
Check them
it.
out.
Yeah.
One thing that might be interesting to geeks is the Analyst Manager add-on.
Right, so we were just talking to Barry yesterday about how to hook into Mailman 3 because we could actually do all kinds of really cool things with that.
I have to head out, but I want to say thank you for coming.
Sure.
I think we need to do testing and I know there will be some controversy attached. But I think this would be a better solution for the average Ubuntu user. If we can find common grounds on the integration pieces, then I think we'd be willing to do some of the work, if you're willing to do some of the work. I think you guys are doing really great work.
Cool, thank you.
There's innovation going on there. It's open source.
Let's do this.
The point about Unity is totally right.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's like you don't have to.
my fault if we sucked up a big thing to this cycle. But if we know we're going somewhere, we can.
Well, I think it'd be interesting to talk about what the right user experience is in something like Unity, right? I think that there's, so to me the netbook edition is not ready for prime time, but I think it's got interesting sort of possibilities thinking of different form factors, different touch interfaces.
In Unity, we're converging our netbook and desktop CDs.
Yeah.
So when you install, will auto-detect if you're on a laptop with certain resolutions. Then we will preferentially set a flag in the configuration in gconf essentially that says preferentially maximize Windows on launch, and also other apps can either just follow that system view, or they can have a linked setting essentially, where if they have a thing that wants to be a full screeny type interface, when you fire up the app, that one's the one that gets used. They can check it on start. And so we've got a pattern, there's a spec around this that's been discussed.
What happens when you plug in the external monitor?
That's a really good question. So we could make it. It would be a live setting in gconf, which is nice. You guys, can you watch gconf?
gconf is going away.
And settings.
Yeah. I've actually got an action to add G7 support to Firefox, unless someone's already working on it.
So that way we can have it so when folks install on a smaller laptop, that's the experience they get. They can turn it off and get the other one. They can say basically always give me the one, always give me the other, or just go with the flow. Yeah. And we'll go with the flow actually. But that's awesome. We ship as the same binary. I assume it can be evoked as part of the dynamic decisions on that style. It's perfect. It's great. There's a similar thing for Evolution, but
Evolution is an express club.
right.
It's not nice, is that?
No, it's maintained. Srinivas wrote on it, Intel works on it.
I think Migo is.
It's the Migo man on it. Just out of curiosity, I don't know if this is relevant. Can you talk at all about Raindrop?
Sure.
What?
Raindrop.
It's about to leave. What's it?
So Raindrop is an experiment we started I guess a year and a half ago, something like that, which was really trying to figure out what we should do about webmail. In the sense that we like Thunderbird, we think it's good to have desktop clients, but we also think that it's kind of important, and there's a bunch of good things about the cloud that people have come up with similar conclusions. And so Raindrop was very experimental and very generic system. So the first idea is you could run it on your laptop or your computer. You could run it on your work group server, or you could run it in the cloud. CouchDB based, IMAP client and Twitter client and whatever else client. Aggregates all your messages, runs them through web plugins, and then displays UIs on top of them. We built a dozen UIs or something like that over the while. We've thrown away the architecture and rebuilt from scratch 2 or 3 times. Threw away Couch when we realized that we were using it really badly. So now it's Python, MySQL backend, SQL backend. And we're kind of figuring out what to do with it. It's
more like a learning project, like maybe we'll take some pieces from this, or
we have taken some pieces for another project. I think that there's an interesting challenge for us to spin up webmail service, and what's the go-to-market strategy? How do you actually get users on this stuff, and then how can you afford to run it? Because running webmail can be expensive. But it's actually a pretty solid code base, and I think the Raindrop, I think the next version of Raindrop will probably be primarily an API endpoint for people to build other front ends to messaging. So it's your thing that maybe your mobile client talks to it as opposed to using IMAP, which is not really good for mobile devices. Talk to it with the rest of the API.
But you did switch away from Couch. There's no more Couch in there?
No Couch right now. We were just really badly using it.
It was performance issues mostly?
Yeah, but they're not Couch's fault. We were using these for temporary variables.
Oh, okay.
Then we'd be rebuilding the index every time.
So would you consider going back to Couch, just purely out of curiosity?
Yeah, there's a bunch of things that are really cool about Couch. I'm not sure that Couch in particular is the right thing for a write-heavy system.
That's what we found. My project is a microblogging client that aggregates Twitter, Facebook, etc. Yeah. And we were using CouchDB much the same way for message storage. and it just didn't work out because of the performance issues. We couldn't store the user's whole set of messages in there without creating all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
So I was just curious, like, what your experience was.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, I learned a lot about database in the process.
Yeah.
All right. So, any other things people want to bring up? Really long about?
What's the
I
name?
know that the 3 magnifying glasses.
Yeah.
Is there somewhere where that netbook UI is available, and what's the name of it?
It's called Thunderbird Air, but it's not packaged as an it's available as a development, so you can download the source and install the extension that way. We don't have a
We haven't actually published it.
yeah. Until we publish them, we don't actually build extensions for them and make them early available. But if you search Thunderbird Air, maybe it's like the first result or something. It'll come up pretty quickly.
I have a question about the local folders. So you've got the local folders, like pad thing. So I never ever use it, and I suspect it probably trips up a lot of users. Is there any direction as to why you show it? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think if you grew up with IMAP, local folders doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but I think most people.
Yeah, so my understanding, so 2 cows was telling me that like 80% of the users just use POP. Which is great for their business because they're really cheap. But it's, and so I think this is one of the places where, so in Thunderbird 3, we have this unified folder view, which abstracts away the local folders.
So they just said,
yeah, it's just, and for example, the outbox is in a local folder, and that's actually a bug in my view, but it's really hard to change. Because you have millions of users who expect things to be where they are. Yeah, that's a very good question. And then there's people who maintain multiple copies of their folders and do all kinds of strange things.
Kavanaugh.
Yep.
What's the status of 64-bit Thunderbird and extensions? At least the ones like.
So we're running experimental 64-bit builds now, and we, I think, have 64-bit Lightning development builds as well. So the things that we build, we are ramping up to 64-bit builds.
So should we see official support for 64-bit anytime soon?
I'm really reluctant to answer that because I don't know the details. So the answer is I don't know. But the fact that we have 90 builds that will tell us if they break is really good for tech.
Right, so, okay.
But I don't know. So for example, we're not likely to do official releases of Thunderbird 64-bit builds on platforms where Firefox is not official 64-bit build, because if we hit bugs in platform or Gecko, we're not going to be able to fix them. So expect Firefox to lead on that. But we're ready to follow pretty quickly after.
We should actually have a working 64-bit build for the version.
Oh, I can find the comment, but not, I mean, yeah, but I mean, when you're looking at, for example, what Pete was saying, I think reporting the latest bugs, experimenting with the latest versions, if you want to do that in a way that will not break your system, the way to do it is either via packages or one way that you can install it and remove it clean. And right now, we're relying on community builds that sometimes may not be there at the next.
Well, I mean, the builds are supposed to be team provided.
Sorry?
The build should be team provided for
Right,
Thunderbird
so that's
extensions. If that's something that's flat.
Right, so we built 64-bit builds. I have no idea what happens in these websites.
Yeah, we built 64-bit. We built 64-bit and ARM as well.
Right, but once they are installed in a stable version, I'm talking about the latest ones.
Right, so that's a process issue that we can't fix. We should be providing those in Thunderbird stable to the.
Oh,
So, we're going to try to work on it this cycle. Or should the extensions in there as well?
Well, I mean, there's, when it's telling you the conversation, start.
It's starting, it's not optional.
These are actually taking the, there are many that are commercial in the sense that they're integration with commercial software. So the
The reason I ask is I'm thinking like, well, if we have Thunderbird in there, can we sell commercial Thunderbird extensions in the store?
yeah, we're working on that. The add-ons that was over.
No, not our servers.
Oh, sure. Pretty sensitive.
If they don't exist, then we can't sell them.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, so the exchange one is obviously the interesting one.
Yes.
And if we're not in a rush, it's
Are you here the rest of the day?
I'm here until tomorrow midday.
I'll meet you at Mark, do you mind sending me
Sure.
If anyone is interested in the account setup, unfortunately I didn't get it to run on my system because I think I haven't built Thunderbird recently enough. But I do have mockups if anyone is interested.
I'm sorry, can you what?
The account setup thing, so where you can sign up for a paid account with your first name and last name, last name, .com, and things like that.
I'd like to see. Thanks very much, guys.
Sure.
This is really helpful.
Good. Well, let's keep up.
It's great to have all you guys here.